there are many people who might be viewing this program.
She's crazy.
who are not familiar with the Rebbe. Not that many people, because the Rebbe is probably the most famous religious Jewish leader of the 20th century, as many people outside of the Hasidic group have said. So I just want to talk a little about the Rebbe. If you try to capture the Rebbe in one paragraph, it would be impossible. The Rebbe is so many facets of the Rebbe. That's what makes him so unusual. The Rebbe, besides being, in my opinion, the greatest Jewish scholar of this period, and maybe of many periods before this, the Rebbe's brilliance is legendary. The Rebbe's memory, incredible, where the famous video where someone who had been with the Rebbe one time, and 19 years later, I believe it was 19 years later, they haven't seen each other, and he comes to get $1 from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe continues the conversation of 19 years earlier, and he's like amazed, and he says to the Rebbe, "You're amazing." And it's so interesting how the Rebbe responds to a compliment.
What does it matter?
I know I have a hard time when someone compliments me. And what am I supposed to say? Thank you, or oh no, I don't deserve the compliment. It's an awkward time to get a compliment from someone. And the Rebbe always used anything that was directed at him to turn it around to challenge you. And the Rebbe
create an educational moment.
Right, and the Rebbe says, what does Jewish education benefit from me being a, because the Rebbe was talking about Jewish education. What benefit does anyone have from me being amazing? It's irrelevant. The Rebbe appreciated the compliment, but he appreciated it because he was able to use it to challenge this person to do more.
Go forth and be amazing yourself.
So the Rebbe, that's the Rebbe's memory, and there's so many other stories of the Rebbe's memory of texts, of people.
You're only speaking about scholarship and memory.
Right, that's just one
minor
phase,
facet.
One facet. But if someone would ask me, okay, there's so much about the Rebbe, what do you think is the most powerful aspect of the Rebbe? And I would say it's not the miracles that he performed. It's not even the scholarship. It's the Rebbe's love and leadership based on that love. And there's no parallel to that. I mean, the Rebbe, as we just noted, wrote volumes and volumes of letters to tens of thousands of people. We only have a small fraction of the letters that the Rebbe wrote. The Rebbe actually didn't write most of the letters. He dictated them, and then when they were written up, he edited them. But those are the Rebbe's letters to thousands upon thousands of people, just responding to their every problem,
so
sorrow,
many situations.
and then people coming to the Rebbe with every imaginable problem. Now, any human being who would get, how many letters did the Rebbe get every day? Hundreds of letters a day.
Just to cope with that.
Hundreds of letters. And I can guarantee you that of 100 letters, 95 were about sad things, were about problems, suffering, pain. And the Rebbe, being such an empathetic person, such a sensitive person, was obviously troubled to no end by all the suffering. The Rebbe would complain that people write to him when they have problems, but when they get better, they forget about writing.
To give him the good news.
The Rebbe wanted to hear good news, but most of the time he got this bad news. And the Rebbe responded to everyone, each person according to his or her nature and needs. Sometimes two people would write the same question and get totally different answers because the Rebbe knew each person individually. I can tell from the answers I got from the Rebbe myself. The Rebbe knew my personality, he knew my strengths and my weaknesses, and responded in kind. So it's the Rebbe's leadership for decades, devoting himself totally to the well-being of the Jewish people and also to non-Jews.
So the people, his love of people and his love of the individual comes out,
right,
and his ability to tune in. I mean, the ultimate therapist, the
right,
ultimate social worker who really invests himself in the person.
One of the unique things about the Rebbe is the paradoxes of the Rebbe. I wrote a small booklet. I had 68 paradoxes of the Rebbe. One of them is that the Rebbe was a world leader. The Rebbe had connections to presidents, to prime ministers, kings. The king of Morocco, for example, was a was a chassid in a certain sense. I'm using it in a very limited sense. He
respected
tremendous
the Rebbe.
respect for the Rebbe, and he sent the Rebbe a gift of a rare book that the Rebbe didn't have in his library, as one of the examples of that. The Rebbe dealt with all sorts of communal leaders, important people, professors and scientists and
ambassadors
and every imaginable.
nation
The
leaders.
The Rebbe was constantly commenting on the situation in Israel. The Israeli government officials had respect for the Rebbe's knowledge of not just political science, but his knowledge of the military strategy and things like that. And yet the Rebbe was so connected to individuals. There are so many thousands of stories where the Rebbe had a relationship with individuals. I remember there was a chassid who the Rebbe had, gotten close to through letters. He met the Rebbe also, and this chassid became observant because of the Rebbe's love for him. And I remember he was a very simple Jew, just barely literate. And I was in a yeshiva in France. This man, he was the cook. Every few weeks, he got another letter from the Rebbe. And to him, that was the happiest day of his life. Every day he got a letter from the Rebbe. And why would the Rebbe send him a letter and give him so much warmth? If you base it on his importance in the Jewish community, based on his public persona, he wasn't a public person at all. But the Rebbe demonstrated you don't have to be a public person to be valuable and be important. The Rebbe treasured every individual and every aspect of that individual.
I remember two stories like that. I remember one where a letter fell down and people went to grab it, and the Rebbe himself bent down to pick it up. And then another one where one of the secretaries withheld, because the Rebbe was not well, it was after his heart attack, they withheld a pile of letters, and the Rebbe asked where all the letters were. The Rebbe could feel that he needed to connect with those people and that each person was important.
Another Montreal story, a young man who was an orphan and who had, I think, certain deficits. The Rebbe showed him tremendous love and affection, and he was not well physically as well. He passed away very young. The Rebbe told him to write a letter and report everything he does every, let's say,
often.
Every 2 weeks, something like that. And in the beginning, he was able to do that, but after a few months went by, he had nothing new to write. His schedule was the same. I woke up in the morning, I washed my hands, I brushed my teeth, I went to the school, to the yeshiva, I studied for an hour. So one week, when the letter was due, he didn't write.
He stopped.
The next day, he gets a call from the Rebbe's secretary. The Rebbe wants to know why you didn't send a letter. The Rebbe got hundreds of letters every day. So he told the Rebbe, he responded through the Rebbe's secretary, that I had nothing to write about. So the Rebbe says, okay, if you can't write every 2 weeks, write every week. The Rebbe was literally uplifting this person, giving him something to live for.
A meaning in his life.
Right. That gave him so much energy and so much, that showed how much the Rebbe thought about him and cared for him. There are just thousands of stories like that with the Rebbe's sensitivity to even one individual. So when we tell stories of the Rebbe, miracle stories, the greatest miracle is the Rebbe's love. Because for a person to devote his life, the Rebbe was an introverted person by nature. The Rebbe himself said that to someone. He has to work on himself every day to not be introverted. And the Rebbe was the most extroverted person I know.
You would think so.
Right. The Rebbe was constantly reaching out to people, helping people, speaking to people. The Rebbe spoke thousands of hours of Torah teachings.
But we know that's a quality in Hasidus. If you've got a tendency that may be a deficit, you work in the opposite direction. Well, that's the Rambam's Hilchos Deos. You work to get to the middle to be able to...
One of the many paradoxes of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was the most introverted and most extroverted at the same time. And these stories are really, I think they capture more the Rebbe's essence than the miracle stories. But we like to tell miracle stories because miracle stories help us recognize that there's a God in this world. And that's one of the Rebbe's major objectives, if not the major objective, to bring the divine into this world, to bring about the Messianic age. What are we working for? What are we striving for to when we do a mitzvah, when we do one mitzvah? Is that the end? No, it's not the end. That's the mechanism through which we bring about bringing God into this world and making the world the ideal, perfect, Messianic world that God created it in order to become eventually. So every time we tell a miracle story, it gives us more awareness of the fact that God is controlling the world. And the truth is, every person could perform a miracle. The Rebbe told someone, everyone could perform a miracle. A miracle doesn't have to be where you cure a sick person. A miracle could be when you change and transform yourself. That's also a miracle. Some people can do even more astounding miracles, and many thousands of miracle stories are told about the Rebbe.